Welcome to the No Experience Podcast, where two man-children with too much independence are on a quest to talk about anything and everything. I'm Jared Hines, and I'm here with my co-host, Ammar Abdullah, and today we're talking about what makes an adult. All right, Ammar. I find this a really interesting concept because ultimately people take so many different perspectives on it.
Yeah, that's agreeable.
One of the most common ones you'll see is what I would consider a more concrete perspective of it. People will consider you an adult at like the age of 18 or 21, or as soon as you can balance a checkbook or drive, shit like that. And then other people take it more from the perspective of like your mentality, like the things that you're able to consider or empathize with. And I think it's interesting for us to try and discuss this because I don't think either of us considers ourselves adults.
You're right on that one. This is something of a loaded topic, Jared. When we brought it up as a concept that we wanted to talk about on the podcast, I sat and I thought about it, and I was like, am I even an adult? Do I even count? Like, am I an adult just because I pay rent and taxes and have a power bill and a phone bill? Like, does that make me an adult? Or am I an adult because I work a full-time job, right? And I think I pretty much came to the conclusion that I don't consider myself an adult. And moreover, I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because there is so much weight in the word of of adult that we have placed on it. But like, for the most part, I think that we never really become adults. We're all sort of just really grown-up children at heart.
Yeah.
But I only say that because I feel that distinction needs to be made because of the societal expectations put on the word of adult.
Yeah. I think, it's hard to say, right? Because from a child's perspective, right? Let's take it from the perspective that you have when you're little, right? You think of an adult as the person who seems to know the answer to every question, who seems to have their life in order, who cares for you, and who
buys all your toys,
right? Seems to have a virtually, from your child perspective, infinite amount of money, right? And so as you grow up, you join the workforce, you get out of high school, you turn 18, you do whatever it is that an 18-year-old kid does. And you quickly come to the realization that like your parents probably didn't know much better than you do, right now. Hell, they probably didn't know much better than you did when you were that age, right? Like, parents are just like anybody doing the best they can with what they have and with what they know, right? So that's the perspective that I think most people get, like, that most people have in terms of like what an adult is, right? It's whatever your parents were, right? And that's tough, right? Because, you look at your parents and you're like, this person seems to have their life in order, right? This person, feeds me. This person buys my clothes, right? And they care for me. And that's what being an adult is now, is it's when you're able to buy clothes and buy food and care for, if not somebody else, at least for yourself, right? And I don't necessarily know that that's useful, right? Like I as a grown-up, I'm terrible with money. I am only semi-competent at being able to cook myself meals, and I dress cheaply and poorly, right? Like, it's, I don't think that becoming an adult is something that I've gone through based on the perspective that I had growing up, and I don't know if it's something that I ever will, or even if it is something that I'd ever want.
That is fair. But still, I can't help but like look at some of the people around me and be like, despite these views, you to me still seem like an adult and like you're the same age as me, right?
Sure.
But I will look at these people and be like, you seem so much more mature, put together. You seem like an adult. And oftentimes I can't quite pinpoint why.
Yeah, you can't, and it's because it's impossible, right? It's a nebulous term that really in a concrete way doesn't mean much of anything. It's a sort of arbitrary distinction that we've given to people when it's like, oh, this is an adult, this is not an adult, right? It's subjective and it doesn't have any real meaning behind it. It's just like whatever your personal idea of an adult is, that's what an adult is, right? So it's hard to like look at somebody else and it's like, okay, this person's the same age as me, but they're an adult and I'm not, right? It's hard to look at that and pinpoint, well, okay, what's the difference, right? Like what's the difference between me and this person? What's the X factor they have that makes them an adult and makes me not an adult? I suppose it's useful to maybe give our definition, like to give our subjective definitions of what we think makes you an adult. For me, the people who have been grown-ups around me my entire life, who I've looked at and been like, that's what an adult is. You know, that's the person, that's what I would want to be like if I were going to be an adult. Were often the people that I think were the most self-assured, the people who seemed to know who they were, you know? And I've tried to replicate that in who I am, where I'm incredibly stable in who I am. You know, the Ammar al-Abdullah, I know who he is, I know what he stands for, right? Which means I suppose I am an adult, right? Because I've replicated the feature of most adults that I liked the best, which is that they were self-assured and they knew what they stood for. So what about you? Of people you consider an adult, have you come to any sort of conclusion about what the factor is they had that made them an adult and you a child?
A conclusion? No. A theory? Always. I'm a bitch of theories, you know. I'm a nebulous construction of theories.
Yeah, you're a group of theories masquerading as a human being.
No, I'm a human being. A theoretical human being, but a human being nonetheless. Anyways, I do have a theory that I think fits a lot of my role models growing up and the people that I looked up to and, you know, saw as adults. And to me, the idea of an adult centers around value. Whatever they value most, whoever they value most, is what drives them. And when they have something that they value so much that they can pick themselves up out of the chair and do whatever they feel like needs to be done in that moment, whatever they feel like is important or pertinent, just get up, do those things, take care of themselves, take care of whatever they need to take care of the people that they love.
So you think it's a question of motivation then?
Motivation, but that value is very important to me because I think somebody who's just motivated but don't have a whole lot that they value and that they value deeply is just kind of hollow. I wouldn't consider that an adult so much as...
Yeah, because I know plenty of kids who are motivated, you know, like high schoolers and shit, seem to have tremendous amounts of motivation, but I don't know that I'd call them adults.
Yeah. No, the kind of adult I'm thinking of is the kind of person who's like my mom.
Sure.
My mom.
The classic example.
Yeah. But we grew up really poor, right?
Join the club, homie.
Yeah. But my mom really loved and valued her kids, her family. So she did the like most in-depth like honky tonk rigging the system to get us as much benefits and cash that we could in the household so that we could survive.
Yeah, my mom did something similar.
Yeah, and she managed to figure out all these ins and outs of this incredibly complicated Idaho state benefits system to her favor, which is hard to do. You see a lot of people who, you know, try to get on benefits and it's still like nowhere near enough. But my single mother who like physically was not able to like go out and work a physical job.
Sure.
Learned all of this stuff on her own for the pure sake of those that she loved.
Her kids in this case.
Yeah.
Sure. I can see your point there. I don't know that I disagree with that. I think that is part of it, you know, like I think both you and I might agree that security in who you are naturally comes with the caveat of security in what you care about, right? Like, you know, I care about I care about some non-specific things. I care about being a good person. I care about the people around me, right? Like, I have a tremendous amount of love for my friends and for my significant other. And for me, that's my key motivator. You know, that's why like I'll do things that I wouldn't have done otherwise, things that might have made me uncomfortable, but they're my friends and I love them. And as such, I'll do things for them, which I suppose, you know, when it comes right down to it, means maybe I could consider myself an adult, I think. I don't know. It's hard to say, right? But
ultimately, we're playing devil's advocate here. We're not, neither of us seem to buy into the adult label.
No, I do not believe in kind of the adult child duopoly. I don't find that dichotomy to be very useful. I think that, you know, we're humans, really, and that's about the best you can say about us. About anybody, really. Like, you might be an adult, you might be a child, or, you know, subjectively in someone's view, but really, it doesn't matter. It boils down to like strange, non-specific, subjective views of yourself and of other people have of you, and I don't care about it one way or the other. You know, like, call me a child, call me an adult, doesn't matter to me.
I am me, and I'm doing the thing.
Yeah, it's like, I'm Ammar Al-Abdullah, you're Jared Hines. That's who we are. I'm not going to call you a kid or an adult, and likewise, I'd expect the same courtesy, right? Like, you know, I think of you as an individual, not so much as your, I don't know, social status on this, like, this perceived adult to child gradient, you know? Like, I don't value that. I don't think it tells you much.
Yeah, nothing will ever take away from me my drive and my ability to just call you Cock Rocket.
Yeah, Cock
and
Rocket.
That be your identity to me.
Yeah, so I'm to you Cock Rocket.
Yes.
Right. I wish I had something in my back pocket that I could lob back at you, but I have nothing. So to me, you're Jared. You're my fucking skinny, kind of weird fuck of a friend, you know, like, and that's what I know about you, right? Like, and I love you, you know, I do. And, you know, ask me the same question about any of my friends. I'll tell you, like, I'm not going to, them being an adult or not is not something I'm ever going to even bring up, right? I'm like, oh, that's fucking, you know, Shlamil. Shlamil is my Arabic friend, right? You know, me and him went to the same mosque growing up, right? Or whatever, you know, like, I don't necessarily think that labels like adult or child are useful in me determining who a person is. I think it's much more useful for me to have an idea of who they are in my head that completely ignores that.
Yeah. These labels tend to even be regressive, if anything.
I think so.
And I find it so frustrating, particularly in the realm of parenting, because obviously parents are meant to protect their children, help them grow, and restrain them.
Well, the primary purpose of a parent in my mind is to care for their child, right? Like, you know, everything else boils down to that.
Yeah. But like, through all of this idea that is often ingrained through generations that an adult, what they say goes, an adult knows better, period, all that stuff. An adult often does know better, but this inherent supremacy, the feeling of supremacy that comes from it, or just this role of supremacy that comes from it, so that you never actually listen to your child.
Yeah, it's weird, and I agree with you. The whole hierarchical nature of like the family unit, I find it tremendously creepy because it's
horrifying.
Like, yeah, because to me, I look at it and I'm like, you don't teach your kid critical thinking at all when you tell them, this, what I say goes because I'm a grown up and you're a kid, right? Like what you should really do is try to teach them the useful critical thinking skills that explain why you hold that position, right? And, critical thinking, especially in our parents' generation and every generation before that, was sort of discouraged, right? There were no critical thinking classes in school. There was no emphasis placed on your ability to look at a situation and determine subjectively why you feel the way you do about it, right? So I think that leads to parents and, adults boiling everything down to the whole, I'm the adult, you are the child, you must listen to me, and never ever thinking about, the how or the why of what they think about certain situations, right? Like if your kid comes to you and says like, I want cookies for dinner, and you tell them no, and when they ask you why, your only response is, I'm an adult, you're a child, that's why. You've done a tremendous disservice to that child because you've not instilled them with the critical thinking skills to be like, well, you can't have a cookie for dinner because there's no nutrition in it. It's not going to sustain you. It's not going to fill you. If you had nothing but cookies for dinner, you would die, right? Like, you should be capable of sitting down with your child and in concrete, simple to understand ways, explain to them why you make the decisions you make as a parent, right? And so that's one of those sort of that's another boiling back down to the adulthood dichotomy, right? Where it's like the adult versus the child means that the child is subservient to the adult. It's weird, hierarchical step in line or, step in line or catch the belt kind of mentality. And I don't agree with any of it.
Mm-hmm.
I find it not very useful.
Yeah, it's not useful. It's inherently damaging, if you ask me. I mean, one of the other things that they're missing out on with this dichotomy is that they're missing out on a shit ton of really important social skills that they could be learning. Yeah. The ability to communicate and relay your feelings and work together in a discussion, coming to a compromise, all of these things completely missed out on because you're Hitlering your child.
I don't know that I'd do that. You kind of Godwin us there, but I don't know. Yeah, in a more basic sense, you're correct, right? Like I'm so glad that I, as a person, took an interest in critical thinking in junior high school and senior high school. I sat down and I figured out what critical thinking was and how to think about issues critically. And I was like, if I had just let my parents determine my I guess values or how I viewed the world, if I had just taken the whole I'm the grown up, you're the child duality, if I had taken that at face value,
you would have been an asshole.
I would have been an asshole. Yeah, like I would have been a douchebag who like would have this might makes right mentality about everybody below me, right? So it's important that you sit and think critically, question why the fuck, be skeptical, question why your parents said that to you and why it's wrong. It's not I'm an adult, therefore I'm right. It's I'm an adult, so using my lived experience, here's why I'm right. It's not the motivation, because it's circular, right? The motivation for the issue can't be I'm an adult and I'm right? Because that's circular. If you don't accept the premise that an adult is right, you won't accept the premise that what they're telling you is correct in that situation, right? It's a catch-22, It begs the question, if you don't accept that premise, then you won't think they're right. But if they explain to you in concrete, empirical, provable reasons why you shouldn't do the thing they're telling you not to do, that's more useful. And your kid will be so grateful for it growing up, right? Like, I've sort of dropped a lot of my my distaste for the way that my parents raised me about that, because they rarely would explain why what I was doing was wrong, and so I would do wrong shit, I would do bad shit, right? And I did not have the ingrained critical thinking skills to know why they were bad because my parents never gave them to me, right? And I think you'd see that, across the country with the whole family unit situation that you'll see a lot of parents raising their kids in, where it's like, I'm big, you're little, I'm smart, you're dumb, I'm right, you're wrong kind of thing, Bad. bad way to raise your kids. And it doesn't help them become a better, more fulfilled adult in the future.
Not at all. Another thing to consider is that children, particularly when they're very young, set you up to make you feel how they feel. So if they feel like they don't have any control, chances are whatever you're feeling dealing with them is probably pretty chaotic and like you're losing control of the situation.
Yeah.
And ironically, one of the best ways to combat that is to specifically give them more control. And it doesn't have to be anything big either. They're children. And they are inherently a little dumb.
Oh, dude, children are fucking idiots, right? Like, I agree.
But you give them a little control back, right? And it can be as little as like letting them choose where to sit at the dinner table or letting them choose which t-shirt they want to wear that day. Just the small things. But it gives them decisions to make, gives them choices, and it gives them more of a sense of control over their life.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've seen that in my life where I know people whose parents made all their choices for them and sheltered the shit out of them. And it fucks you up mentally. You grow up with no sense of personal identity. You don't know who you are, right? Mm-hmm. So you never can make, by my subjective estimation, you can never make the transition to adulthood if your parents like make all your decisions for you and don't let you question them, right? Like you will never be an adult if that happens to you. Mm-hmm. Or at least it will take you a lot longer. You'll be many years behind your peers, right? And I should say, we should both say, this comes from the perspective of two 21-year-old guys who don't have any kids, right? Like, well, I'm 21, you're 20, yeah? Yeah, so, you know, neither of us has kids, so maybe we're not qualified to speak on this, but I can speak to you from my subjective experience that I've thought a lot about and say that I think that I was raised in such a way where critical thinking was not valued in my household. Falling in line to authority figures is what was valued in my household. And that's led to me having a pathological, and I'm not shooting smoke, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass here. From conversations I've had with my therapist, that's led to me developing a pathological aversion to authority figures where like every time I have a job, I assume my boss is trying to fuck me, right? You know, every time I've been in school, I assume my teachers are trying to fuck with me, right? Like it fucks your brain up, man. You gotta raise your kids with, you know, two major things. You gotta raise them with a lot of love and care and affection and patience, right? Like, you know, those kind of boil down to, you know, love. You gotta raise your kids with a lot of love, and you have to raise them with a natural skepticism, an ability to critically think about issues and not just fall in line to authority figures, because that's the core root of a lot of issues in our world is people just kowtowing to the will of authority figures, you know? So those are sort of the two things that if there's any parents listening, I would encourage you to do. Raise your kids with love and raise your kids with skepticism.
And an idea of consent, just throwing that.
Yeah, that isn't necessarily relevant to anything we're talking about.
But I like...
But yeah, sexual assault is a problem. Raise your kids with a very concrete idea of what consent means, please.
Please and thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. You know, we speak from experience. Please raise your kids with an idea of what consent is.
And doubling back real quick to the fact that we're a couple of idiots with shit takes. If you've made it this far in the podcast, you should know about that by now. So no more disclaimers.
Yeah, no, from now on, you know, if you've listened to any episodes of our podcast, you would know that we're two morons with no right to talk about anything. That's the conceit of the podcast, though. So if you're listening, then you already knew that. So anyway, I think that's pretty much all that we got to say about that. Adulthood is fake, and raise your kids with critical thinking skills.
Precisely. Thank you for listening to the No Experience podcast. It was nice to have you here. We hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you're not already subscribed, we would sure love to have you. And you can hit that bell notification if you want to know as soon as we release new episodes. And if you don't want that, we're releasing on Fridays.
Yeah, we release on Fridays, basically. You know. So you can also follow us on Facebook. We got a Facebook page. You can follow me on Twitter at The Dongan Man. where I'll release updates relating to the podcast. Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. We love doing this podcast for you, and we're glad that even a few people might be listening.
Yeah, this has been an incredibly fulfilling project for me, and I hope for my co-host here as well.
For both of us. It's been the most fulfilling thing I've done in a long time. The only artistic pursuit I've gone all the way with in quite some time.
Yeah. Gang, gang. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.